Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming to the Human-Centered Design Industry Review as part of DFA Days of Summer. This is the first session of its kind, so I'm really excited to be here with you all. And thank you to our panelists from Artefact and IBM for being here and really making this all happen, as well as everyone from the audience. To kick us off, I'm just going to share a bit about what we're going to do today, and then we'll start off with introductions. So today's objective, we're here to learn a little bit about design roles post-college and what you can really do with the skill sets that you're learning. We're going to see some example portfolio and resume works from DFA students and alumni. We'll hear from our professionals in a sort of think aloud format, and they'll be giving constructive feedback. And then we'll wrap up with a Q&A with our panelists. As for the mode of conduct for everyone today, please, I encourage you all to share your questions in the chat as the panelists are giving feedback, as you're seeing people's work. If you have questions about anything that we're discussing, please share them in the chat and we'll get to them in the Q&A. But last but not least, we're here in a group of people who are all interested and invested in design and social impact in some manner or form. And so connect with each other, get each other's LinkedIns, and work together to, share your resumes and your work with each other to improve and reach your goals, whatever they might be. This is a really valuable community and network, and that's probably, one of the most important things that you can take away from here is this community. So to kick off, I want to start with the audience, and I want to know, I know some people are doing introductions in the chat beforehand. We were doing name, pronouns, and why you're interested in design. But to dig a little deeper, I want to hear from people. Raise your hands if you are interested in user experience design or some sort of product design, or if you already do this kind of work. Cool, I see a few. Rachel, can I call on you to explain, give us a few words on why you're interested in this field?
Yeah, me, Rachel. Am I the only Rachel? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm really interested in user experience design because it's really bottom up instead of top down, and really has an emphasis on talking to users and getting their input and working with people instead of working for people. And I think that's extremely important. So that's why I'm interested in it.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. All right, can I get a raise of hands if you're interested in design research? Doing all of the digging and learning about the people that you'll be working with. Hannah Rudin, I'd love to hear some words about why you're interested in design research.
Yeah, thanks. I like asking the questions and talking to people and figuring out what questions to ask. I feel like it's sometimes like a missing step in the design process that should be there.
Totally. All right, thank you for sharing. What about design and strategy? Any hands in the room for people that are interested in design and strategy? Awesome. Laura, would you mind sharing a few words about your interests?
Yeah, I love playing around with graphic design, but don't necessarily have the formal training in visual design. And I'm very interested in the intersection between that kind of design thinking principles and how that intersects with planning and strategy and drawing insights. More of the interpersonal side of interviewing and getting to know communities is really interesting to me.
Cool. Thank you so much for sharing. These are just a few of the sort of subtopics within human-centered design that we'll be talking about today, but of course there's others like visual design, you've got interaction design, service design, and you don't have to fit any one of these categories. Your practices can be very interdisciplinary. So with that, I would love to introduce the panelists, or actually have them introduce themselves. If you can share your name, your pronouns, what you studied, or your background, where you sort of started as, and then your current role and your relationship to design. I'm just gonna call on Jeff.
Yeah, I'm Jeff Howell, a design director at Artefact. He, him. I went to design school in New England, actually, up in Vermont, and got a background in visual communication and sort of worked very closely on the brand side and just overall sort of print design, packaging. It kind of ran the gamut. And then moved into interaction design first, and then slowly kind of drifted over to focus on digital products exclusively. The job in Artefact is what brought me to Seattle. And so I've been here working with them for 3 years. And in my current role, I oversee a lot of like actual product execution work in a variety of mediums, whether it's XR, your standard kind of 2D suite. But day to day, I'd say I'm either executing or mentoring those who are executing actual product work as it begins to take shape and head out the door.
Awesome. Hannah, I'd love to hear from you next.
Yeah, happy to be here. So my name is Hannah Hoffman, pronouns she, her. I also work with Jefferson at Artefact. In terms of my design background, I was in high school. I lived in Brazil. I didn't speak the language. And I found that art and design was a way for me to make friends and connect to people. So ever since then, I kind of decided I wanted to be a designer. So now my role at Artefact, I sort of bridge the gap between visual communication and human-centered design research. So I do a little bit of workshops, a little bit of visual design, a little bit of everything.
Awesome. I love what you said about design, like being how you made friends, because that's like just resonates with me so much with DFA. Like, this is my community. So snaps for that. Felix.
Hi, everyone. I'm Felix Chang. I'm an Associate Strategy Director at Artefact. I actually used to work at IBM in Austin, so I know there are many other IBMers on the call, so hello. I studied in college social psychology with a focus on virtual reality at Stanford. And I think what I learned from that experience was that social psychology takes like 2 years to produce a study, and I wanted something where you could learn things and then apply it more quickly. So that's really how I found my way into design and design research. And then transition my way into strategy now at Artefact. So on a day-to-day basis, I do design research projects, but also a lot of workshop facilitation, strategy projects. And then I do love when I collaborate with design teams as well. So really excited to be here. I think at Artefact, we really think about how we can try to advance equity and sustainability through design. And so really see this as a great community to learn from and hear from what everyone else is doing.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Felix. And I'm going to jump ahead to Izzy.
Hey everyone, I'm Izzy Kane. I am currently a user experience designer at IBM based in Poughkeepsie, New York. I graduated from RPI with a dual degree in business and design in 2018, so I kind of slid right into the whole design aspect, but I was really drawn to design from the get-go because of the creative problem solving aspect that design has with it, and I really like that about UX. And I've been doing some interface design projects at IBM, but more recently doing some more service design and a lot of research as well. So I'm really happy to take on those aspects of work as well. And my pronouns, she, her. And I think that's everything that you wanted.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'll jump the ball to Ruby.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Ruby, my pronouns are she, her. Yeah, I'm a design researcher at IBM. When I first started, I was working on the same team as Izzy, and now we're working on different projects. I studied anthropology at Northwestern, so it's definitely very different from what I'm doing now, but also in a lot of ways very similar. But I also was involved in Design for America in school. I was really interested in design, and particularly in all of my design classes, just kind of the process of teaching design to other people and working with people who weren't really like as familiar with design or design principles. So the thing that I enjoy the most about my job right now is definitely doing design workshops and talking with, you know, other people in other business units or just other areas that like really don't interact with design at all on a regular basis and bringing them into that. So yeah, happy to be here. Excited to see what people have to share.
Awesome. Thank you, Ruby. And last but not least, Karel.
Great. Yes, Karel Vredenburg is how I pronounce that collection of letters, and he, him. And I started off life in music, and then I moved over to clinical psychology and cognitive psychology. And during my PhD, I actually noticed in getting research assistance from the studies that I was doing that there was this major gender difference in computer use. And so I started to do research in that. And then I pivoted to what was then called human-computer interaction, because I've been at this for a few thousand years, more than many of you have. And then was majoring on human-computer interaction, presented a bunch of the research at a conference about that. And somebody from IBM gave me a call and said, have you ever thought of working for IBM? And I honestly answered no. But I had read a book about the founders and the values that the company had. And so this is about 32 years ago. And I said, I'll give it a year. And it's sort of been the history ever since. And over the last 7 years, we've put design on steroids. That's where all the lovely people that we have on the call from IBM were hired together with about 2,500 other designers into the way the company works today. And I also had the joy of connecting up with Rebecca and the rest of the team from DFA. And I'm just so thrilled to be working again with all of you, because I think this organization is amazing at sort of organizing the focus on design for good and appropriate design skills and the like. And so I'm delighted to be here. That's my quick, but not that quick introduction.
Thank you so much, Karel. And before I forget, I wanted to do a quick introduction of the two companies that we have present. So IBM is a global technology company. They provide hardware, software, cloud-based services, and cognitive computing. And they have 57 design studios all across the country. Artefact, on the other hand, is a strategy and design firm, and they're focused on making change and doing good. And their projects are involved in a variety of spheres, such as health, mobility, education, technology, and tools. So we have two sort of vastly different, not vastly, very different organizationally structured companies, but you know, all of the people that we have present are very passionate about design and using that to make some positive change in the world. So that is, let's give a round of snaps for our panelists, because this is going to kick off our next round. So we're going to jump into the next round of this session, which will be a portfolio and resume review session. We've put a lot of thought and consideration into the works that were submitted for this panel, and the ones that we have chosen to show and to review in this panel are really to show a breadth of the skill sets and expertise of different disciplines and practices and backgrounds. So with that being said, I am going to be the tech person for today, and I will be screen sharing. I will be doing a quick review of the portfolio first, and then jump into one or two projects, and then start off the conversation for our panelists to do a talk aloud about the qualities of each candidate's work. All right, so here we go. All right, can you see this? Okay, so our first candidate is DQ. They're a alumni from DFA Northwestern, and they're interested in UX design as their profession. So to give a quick overview of their portfolio, they have a nice homepage. It's really decorated with illustrations And there's a really interesting format for navigating. So I can hover over these letters to see projects or chat. I can also click on these letters to see the full view of projects. So I'm just gonna go into one of them and take a look. This is redesigning the checkout page for food delivery for desktop users. And a quick overview of this project. They have some really great call outs of design criteria that they're thinking about. They've identified some mistakes in the original design, and then also a design handoff for the final delivery. So I think when I was looking at this candidate's work, I thought there was a really creative showcase of visuals and navigation for their website. I'd love to hear some comments from our panelists.
Who's going to go first?
Hi, this is Felix.
Yeah,
Okay.
Felix.
Oh, no, I just wanted to say that I really appreciated how unique this portfolio was. And Hannah and I were talking about it as we were reviewing it, and I think it really just brings a sense of joy, and you can tell that you really enjoy design. And I think it's also really unique in that it will stand out. I think a lot of portfolios are really looking the same, and this is definitely one that will catch your attention.
I would maybe jump on top of that as well, +1 on everything you said, Felix. I think it really is creative. I think it's also, the layout is great. The way you guide people through it is really great. The suggestions that I would make to improve it is, and this goes for in general, my perspective is that I'd like to really get to know the designer as well as your work. And so a little bit more about, you know, what your point of view on design is beyond the pieces that you're choosing to show. Really go deep into what kinds of philosophies you have, and then also how does the work reflect, you know, that work as well. The other thing I always like to say is that you only have a few minutes typically, or sometimes even seconds, to grab somebody's interest of somebody that's going through a lot of different portfolios. And I think you want to, and I wanted to reinforce the unique approach that you took to your homepage with the letters of your name and the like. But I also thought that it takes additional work to get to the wonderful work that you actually show. And so my own desire would be to get more quickly to show the work that you're doing, the breadth of everything you're doing, and maybe that should be, you know, a full, you know, scrolling page sort of design. But across the board, I think some really nice work. But the only things I would suggest is make it a little more personal. Tell us a little bit more about what you were as a designer and what your point of view is. That's my thought.
I think those are wonderful pieces of feedback. I'd like to jump on that final point there. And I had something similar, whereas I really do appreciate the cleverness between the transition from the names to the projects. I think the challenge is that it doesn't necessarily do the best job showcasing the projects themselves. So you've sort of traded off like the cleverness of the interaction with an actual explanation, or maybe something that draws me into the projects. And I won't say that's like a good or bad trade-off, but just be aware of the trade-off that you're making. The other 2 points that I had personally was, I think that everyone's right. Like, you've done a really nice job with the visual design and sort of adding hierarchy to the case studies and making them engaging. I found that some of them, like, because it was so focused on presenting these and pacing these bite-sized chunks, like the linear narrative, the through line from beginning to end kind of got a little muddy, and it wasn't always very easy to see like the big picture story, even though you've done a wonderful job showcasing like the micro story within any given section. And the other thing I had, I think that was just related to storytelling, was it was in a similar food case study, but you have some really nice copywriting. So you talk about less is more and some of the choices that you've made to improve the design. But I have a hard time understanding if those are actual improvements. Like, they're not really grounded in research or insights. And so, while I am not going to fight you on this idea that less is more, it doesn't really explain the trade-offs you made or how you actually narrowed down to a streamlined set of choices, whether it was through reducing choices from information architecture, whether it was reducing actions. Like, yeah, this is probably true in spirit, but how did you get there? Like, what did you have to do to be able to give people less options?
Right. I think one of the points brought up in the feedback was like, where's the testing and where are the methods that you use to get to your final solution? But going backwards a little bit, thank you, Jeff, Felix, and Karel for that feedback. Yeah, the navigation is really interesting, but it takes some time to click through, and it's almost like hidden, like the projects are hidden unless I click on this link right over here. And lastly, I wanted to go back to something Karel said about philosophy, which I think is so interesting. I'm going to read out the intent that our candidate submitted along with this portfolio. My ideal role is a junior experienced designer for a product that involves software and hardware service components. Ideally, I would work on a small team to help curate smooth and delightful experiences for customers. And they're also open to working on enterprise tools if there's a need, but they're primarily focused on customer-facing products. So it is very like work-oriented, and I can see where it comes in, where are the actual values that this person stands for and what sort of impact do they want to make with their work, aside from it being smooth and a delightful experience. What else is attached to that in terms of, intent and outcome? Awesome. So we're gonna move on to the next our next candidate, Jessie. And Jessie is also a DFA alumni from Purdue, and they are interested in UX design and product design. So here's a quick overview of their portfolio. Very sleek and very clean. I love the bold colors. They have a work section, playground, and about and resume. This playground is a collection of work where they've experimented with concepts, styles, and media. So it seems to just be quick screen grabs of some experimental work, which is very cool. Yeah, I'd love to hear some comments from our panelists.
This is Hannah. I would say that my first impression is that Jessie's site is super easy to navigate. I think the work is stunning. Your statement that you had around how you really want to showcase being detail-oriented, thoughtful, a multidisciplinary designer, that comes through, I think, in how you express your work, which is really great. So it's really nice the way that your sentiment that you wrote is reflected in your work. They feel really cohesive together. A few potential opportunities that I noticed for improvement is, first, I think the body copy on your site is pretty itty bitty. I think it's about 13 pixels or so. So I think for people who want to quickly scan, that's one thing to consider, is just increasing your font size a little bit there. Another thing I would say is just being careful in research when using a full patient's name, even if they've approved it. That's something that I definitely watch out for in research, of just making sure that, especially when we're talking about healthcare, it's good to keep people a little bit more anonymous. And then finally, I would just say the Jen Green case study, I think, was really exemplary for me in terms of length and like the speed at which you walked through certain points. So that could also be a good marker, I think, to use, I guess, in reference for your other case studies in terms of length. So some of the other ones I can't quite remember which definitely were a little bit longer. So I think it would be good to look at just sort of the flow and the beats that you hit with this one as a good guide.
I wrote down, just to be, I think I can build on that and be clear, like the core case study was really long. I thought it was full of solid work. If you're going to go to that length, perhaps breaking up sort of discovery and execution, so there's just like a mental pause for me, because otherwise it's like going top to bottom. It's just a lot. And overall, I think my feedback's roughly the same. Like the presentation here is really, really strong. It's a question of finding consistency in the storytelling and making sure that all the case studies sort of are delivering the right information. On the other side, I felt like the auto insurance case study was maybe a little light on some of the storytelling bones. Like I can see the outcome and the redesign and the quality of the work that you did, but I actually don't know what the goal was necessarily, or where you were trying to solve a problem here. So really, really nice portfolio, just a little bit of consistency in telling a story.
I would add a little bit, and then I'll let the other reviewers speak up as well. I think the other thing is that to empathize a little more with your, in addition to all the positive things as said, empathize more with your user, in the sense that I always believe that a portfolio is a designer's best piece of work, and you should be designing it like it's a piece of design that you're designing for a user. The user is in fact the potential employer. And if you think about it from that point of view, you might want to also provide a little more context. Why am I looking at this piece? What does this mean to me? How does it relate to this other collection of pieces and the like? So guide the viewer, your potential employer, through what you would like them to experience. And to Jeff and Hannah's point in terms of brevity, they also don't have a whole lot of time. And so get to your points, get to maybe your best pieces that you are most interested in showing up front, but provide some more context, a little more of yourself as well.
Yeah, so thank you so much for that feedback. Yeah, I think we can all agree that the portfolio looks really beautiful, and the process behind it is also very in-depth. But could be cut down just a little bit, a tad bit, for brevity, because the people reading it, I guess in a scenario, it would be your future employers. They don't have a lot of time. So how can you get the most important points across a little bit quicker? One other thing that I'm curious about is like the personality of this person. Aside from their work, like who are they and what is it actually like to work with this person? I wonder what their collaborative style is. But yeah, I think I could definitely depend on them to do the visual design and the execution for all of that. Awesome, thank you so much. All right, the next candidate that we'll be looking at is T, who is interested in visual design, teaching, and design research. More specifically, they are interested in creating a new sort of name for themselves for community design. So their portfolio starts with a hello page, a lovely, friendly introduction. They're a visual communication designer, teacher, and design research practitioner, working in both print and digital forms. They love to collaborate on multidisciplinary projects and amplify the voices of different constituencies or social economic groups. They're really passionate about community building, personal empowerment, and they believe that design should give people the ownership to take the lead and build their own communities. Personally, I love this because I know T in person. She was an intern last summer in 2019 at DFA, and this is totally something they would say, I have too many hobbies. So let's jump ahead to their projects and their portfolio. A quick overview. There's a clean nav on the left side with different organizations for a lot of different projects, design and research, branding, editorial, and UX UI, and typeface, as well as a contact. And I'm just gonna jump into a project, but yeah, I'd love to open it up to feedback.
Yeah, this is Izzy. I really like the nav on the left. I think that's a really good way of kind of like outlining all of your projects and having your different disciplines that you have experience working in. However, I think you have a bit too much. I don't think any one portfolio reviewer could sit down and go through all of these projects. So it might be wise to stack them purposefully, so you either have your favorite projects at the top or the ones that you really put in a lot of effort in at the top, maybe a couple or something, or maybe try to slip these down a little bit. I was also a little confused about the projects on the right because I really do like the left-hand nav, but I wasn't sure if you pulled out the projects to the right to kind of highlight your favorite projects that you worked on or want to draw attention to those. But maybe guiding the user towards that a little bit more, saying like, giving some context around the projects to the right, either saying these are my favorite, or I recommend you start, looking through the projects here.
Just to add on to that, like, I guess this is feedback that I would give to any of the people that we've reviewed so far. I just haven't had a chance to jump in yet, but I think being like very explicit about the methods that you use is a really good thing to do. You do that in like some of these use cases and it's really fantastic. And then in some of them it's kind of missing. And really sharing, like, especially if you're looking into research roles, like really being explicit about why you use those methods. And then I think also, especially as a student or a person just kind of joining the field, really sharing what you learned from the experiences that you have had. Like if you're able to just put in a couple of lines about, you know, this is what I would do next time, or this is what I learned from this experience. I think that's really helpful and really shows like a growth mindset as a designer. And I don't know if that's just my personal philosophy, but it's something that I think is really important for a portfolio.
I love that, Ruby. I think you're bang on. What I always like to say is that imagine you're sitting with me, like in terms of the candidate. Imagine that you're sitting with me or showing me your work. You know, the narrative you would use then to describe, you know, this is the challenge we had. This is the first thing I did. And this, to your point, Ruby, this is what I learned from that. We went here instead. This is the work. I worked with a team. I did this piece of the work. The rest of the team did this. So more of that rather than the here is a textbook of everything that we did. So I think again, a really quite incredible portfolio, and I love the idea too that Izzy talked about the notion of take your favorite work and illustrate it. And you could even, in cases where you're applying for a particular role, you may well want to just optimize, you know, and it looks like your site is able to be done that way. Optimize for the role that you're actually applying for. That might be the primary role that you're going to get the job for, because you do have an incredible breadth of material here. And so you might want to focus.
Yeah, I want to add one of the interesting notes that I think Hannah added is about the really unique personal statement that showed their specific interests and values. So I want to quickly share that. They shared that my creative practice aligns at the intersection of visual design, teaching, and design research. I explicitly use visual design principles and materials to tell stories in both print and digital platforms. And more specifically, the part about like amplifying the voices of different constituencies or social economic groups. And I think, Hannah, what you were trying to say in your comments was like digging deeper into that. Like, why do those three fields help you do what you're interested in doing? How do they help you achieve your goals? And being able to somehow tie those threads into the work or the projects that you highlight might be, you know, would tie it all together a little bit more. Awesome. Hannah, did you want to add anything to that? I know you're like nodding.
No, just that I loved T's statement. And I think those three lenses that you bring to design are a great sort of like forcing mechanism to figure out what the top 5 or 7 case studies, as Izzy mentioned, are the most important. So just be true to your statement and let the work reflect it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, I'm doing a quick time check. All right, so let's see. The next person that we're going to take a look at, next candidate, is a current student. They are a student at RISD Brown, and they are interested in UX and design strategy. So here's their portfolio. They've got design, skills, and about. This is Sivian. They have some accessibility projects, museum, destigmatizing the archive. I'm gonna take a look at their about page, and they have their resume right on here. Cool. And I know from our reviews, a lot of us already know that the projects are really well done, but I would love to hear more from our panelists.
One quick
similar comment. Oh, go ahead. Nobody was saying something. I'll jump in. No, you go ahead.
One quick comment for me at the top of your portfolio. I love, love, love how you just have those like project prompts, time frame, who you worked with, background. That like little blurb already tells me so much about the project, and I wish pretty much every portfolio piece would have something similar to this. So I just get some background information before I start diving into the actual prompt. You know, if you were working with people, what tools you use, what you learned from it, so on and so forth. It just really sets the context for me understanding your project a little bit better.
At the same time, like if you read this particular project prompt, it's almost like it's kind of a wonderful but unfair prompt to give to anybody. Like it's impossibly broad. Reimagine an experience of your choice. I think you've done a really nice job sort of creating how might we's that are emotionally resonant, and I think are like ambitious, and it's very clear the kinds of work that you want to do and what your focus is. And I do love that, especially the journey mapping and all of the understanding that gets built into the problems you're trying to tackle. I think the biggest challenge, at least from my perspective, with a portfolio like this, or even a statement like these how might we's, is they're very hard to solve for, and I don't know that I always see like, or am able to tie back the chosen solution with the statement at the outset. So I love all the statements, but in the case of Prometheus, like it's not always clear exactly how this ladders up to that original very, very challenging and broad statement.
I think building off what Jefferson said. Oh, sorry.
No, I'm done. You go.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I agree. I really like the question framing with questions, especially since you're interested in pursuing research and strategy roles. I think one thing to try, I noticed you did it on some of your case studies, is to help close that loop that Jefferson mentioned, is potentially really emphasizing outcomes and impact as a new section at the bottom of all of your case studies. And that will allow you to easily relate, kind of like neatly tie up your case study with the question that you pose at the beginning. And then also speaking to how this work was received and sort of what the next steps for it are.
Yeah, Felix, I would actually love to hear from you more about, you know, what does strategy look like, and how is that different from just the other UX or the other design roles that we've heard so far?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think in terms of portfolios, presentation is pretty similar. I think one thing this portfolio does really well is, even though it's a strategy or research portfolio, you still show a lot of different visual frameworks as a way to communicate your insights and design intentions. I think sometimes there's the stereotype that, oh, like researchers just like make these really ugly, you know, like ugly sites. But I think this portfolio is a great example of how, when you're able to present information succinctly and in a visually organized way, it really appeals to people. Especially as a design strategist or a design researcher, when you will be collaborating with designers all the time, it's something that they both look for. And then I think it also shows that you're able to contribute to your project teams in more sort of nuanced ways. So I think continuing to really show your insights, I think in the way that you've done, really succinctly and visually through frameworks that organize the information, is a great strategy. So I encourage you to continue doing that.
Awesome.
A comment that I would make, similar to the comments I made regarding some of the other portfolios, is to start off with who you are and what your overall sort of perspective is and point of view and the like. I know you, even in the about, you go to, you know, your resume, but that's I don't think that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for, you know, your point of view, and you clearly have it in the work that you're showing, but summarize it, you know, in the overview at the beginning as well. And even to Jefferson's point about not every project has to have an incredible outcome. You can actually talk about what you know, learning you went through, and that what you might do if you were to do the project again. I know that was mentioned earlier as well. So it doesn't have to be nicely tied up. You didn't solve these massive how might we's with you know, one, you know, piece of industrial design, let's say, that's going to solve the world's problems. But I think that would make it even stronger. It's really nice work, though.
And I just want to clarify, like, I think Felix put it well to close the loop. I'm not suggesting that you should have tighter or like less interesting how might we's. It's just a question of how you storytell the outcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for those points. Yeah, I think especially as student work, I know sometimes, at least like when I'm looking at other people's portfolios and trying to improve my own, I'll go find someone who's like a design director and they have a super polished, shiny portfolio with like 3 things on it, and they've all won awards. And sometimes that doesn't show as much of the process that maybe like starting out as a beginner, as a green, you know, new 1 to 2 year in designer person, you know, hasn't had those opportunities and experiences yet.
Hey, Glory, could I just make a quick comment too? So,
Yeah.
so I at IBM, one of my roles is I chair the Design Leadership Review Board, which evaluates packages for people that are going to be evaluated for the highest level design executive positions in the company. And the comments I'm making are exactly the same for those packages, right? So you don't start, it's not just that you need a portfolio to get a job. In order to get promoted or to change jobs, you also need to have a portfolio. So telling your story, that's our major, and right now we're going through this big review. Last night was the deadline for all these submissions. So I'm reading through a ton of that. It's the same things that I'm seeing though. So don't just show your pieces, show yourself, show your story, your personal story, and the like as well. Okay, back to you, Glory.
Oh no, that was great. Yeah, and I think that that's a great way to round up this review session. For the sake of time, we're going to go into a Q&A after this. But I think there's so much already imbued in this idea of a portfolio that it's not just showcasing the design work that you can do and the storytelling to capture your audience's attention, but it's also a piece of who you are. Like, what do you stand for? What do you care about? What sort of contribution do you want to make in the world? Yeah. Okay, so I want to open it up to the Q&A, so I'm going to stop sharing. I know you guys, the audience, must have some very, very interesting questions that they want to ask our panelists. So feel free to type them in the chat or raise your hand, and I will be looking through our gallery view to see those lovely hands or questions. Any questions? No questions. Okay.
I have a question. Can I
Oh,
ask one of my fellow panelists, if you
yes.
don't mind? I'm just really curious. So I'm dying to know, on average, how long you guys spend on any given project when reviewing a portfolio, and the time spent just overall when you're reviewing a portfolio like this. And implicitly, I'm also like just asking kind of how you're making a decision quickly and what you do with that decision.
Anybody
No,
else
don't answer at
wants
once.
to answer first? I was going to say.
Go ahead.
Anybody?
Yeah, you.
I'll go for it. Okay. I spend more time in my job looking at the promotion ones rather than the early hire ones, although I used to run that about 7 years ago. I actually spend a fair bit of time on even though I said, look, you got to focus and make sure you look directly at the impression that you're going to make really quickly. I mean, the ones that are coming in, we've got 38 promotion to our what's called our design principal level in the company right now that I'm reviewing. And we have quads of teams, just so you understand how this works, is that we have two design executives and 2 design principals assigned to review about 3 portfolios and packages. And they spend typically about 2-3 hours reviewing those and making comments on them. And then that's one cycle. and then there's feedback again on how to improve their packages and the like. And that's at the promotion level. At the incoming review level, it probably really differs. I still have taken it very, very seriously. And what we do is we do a first pass review that we get about 2 or 3 people, and maybe I can ask for Izzy and Ruby to talk about this as well, but because they're more directly involved, I think, in reviewing incoming early hires. But we basically do a quick review of portfolio and resume, and then we do sort of in-person or now Zoom-based sort of interviews beyond there. But Izzy, Ruby, do you want to just talk about your experience in terms of interviews and looking at portfolios and resumes?
Definitely. I know you asked for a time how much we spend on each portfolio. It really depends, because sometimes you can immediately tell that someone applied for the wrong position. Like if they were more of a developer or something and they thought UX would be more, developer-y than it actually is. And, UX is more of a design role. So you can sometimes immediately tell from portfolios that they're not right for the job. And I'll write down, the steps that they would need to take to get into a UX job. But the portfolios, the more classic design portfolios, I would spend anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes on one portfolio. But I've heard from other people that they only spend 5 to 10 minutes. I just don't think that's respectful.
Wow. 20, 30 minutes. That's great. That's great.
I mean, I think I personally put so much effort into my own portfolio, and it's like really all you have to communicate your story to your employer. So I just figured I want to give, respect to the people that are applying to these jobs and like give them some time to express their process and their storytelling and who they are, and really like actually think if they would be a good asset to the IBM design community. But I know that interviews are a little bit different than the portfolio reviews, and the interview process is, I've had a lot of fun with that, and those in-person interviews and the design challenges and things like that. But I haven't done those in quite a bit of time, so I don't know if the process has changed for that at all.
Izzy, it might be worth it first to mention too that what we do is have a system that, like a scoring system. I think that's still the way it is, where it's a 5-point scoring system. And if the resume and portfolio sort of exceeds whatever number, I think it's 4 or 5 or something, then they're going to go get an interview. And so it's really quite and then there's just a ton. We went, I think when we hired our 2,500 designers, we went through something like 20,000 our portfolios and resumes. So to the point where sometimes you take 10 minutes, 15 minutes, if you've got a lot to go through. But the whole point is to, and that's my point about try to make it as personal as you can. I always try to imagine I'm going to be working with this person, and I care as much about their personality and whether they were going to get along and work together as the quality of the artifacts that they show in a portfolio. And that's hard to do. As Izzy says, it's your one bit of information that can get you in the door for an interview, right? But Jeff, we're going to ask back at you again. How about you? How much time do you typically spend?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I know we work at sort of different types of organizations. I think all of the things that you guys said are true in terms of fit and who this person is and wanting to learn more about them. The key difference here is I tend to do in-person or like more face-to-face informationals to try to get that. And so when I'm looking at a portfolio, it's really just a very quick skills check to see if we want to maybe bring in and learn more about this individual. And I probably spend a couple minutes. And again, we're much smaller, and like I kind of know usually what we're looking for. So it's a quick scan. Does this person have they met the requisite bar for them to thrive at Artefact? Now let's bring them in and learn more about them as a person, how they think, what their POV is, and all that. I don't personally look for that as much in the portfolio.
Thank you so much, Karel, Jeff, Izzy. We have some awesome questions coming in the chat, so I'm going to start with my use. One thing, so they say, one thing I keep hearing is the balance of succinct storytelling plus having the details on research methods, insights, reflection, impact, etc. And they kind of seem like 2 different use cases. So like skimming versus getting all of that background process information. Does anyone have any advice on managing those two?
I think like I was about to answer this question just kind of like through the other question, but I think there have been, I've mainly just reviewed like intern portfolios. So it's a slightly different system and I'm just looking over them before I interview. But there have been times where I've been able to give 30 minutes and times where I've only really been able to like give 5 minutes because the request came in really last minute. And I think that like using like visual hierarchy is your best friend and things like this. Like I want to be able to look through a portfolio, look through a project and see like check off all of those boxes of like what your skill sets are, like what your methods were, like what your insights were, et cetera. And then also have it be able to stand up to a more rigorous review later on. If I go back and like want to look at it and spend an hour looking at this, like, is there enough information in there? So I think like a couple of the candidates that we reviewed today had really excellent kind of like headers that talked about some of those components and a really concise kind of directory and like user flow that they dictated when things were, as you like the reader went through, and those are very, very helpful for, you know, both of those use cases. So that would be my advice there.
I think building off of what Ruby is saying, I definitely agree. I think use of hierarchy is super important. And then I think I would almost think of it as like you're putting your portfolio through 2 readings. So let's say at Artefact, we're obviously a much smaller company than IBM. So often, say we have a job posting, we'll get 200 to 300 applications for it, and we only have one person doing the initial triage of all 300 portfolios. So I think the initial pass, you need to be able to have your portfolio really quickly communicate in 1 minute, like you have the right skills and you have the right background interests. And then kind of the second pass is, all right, when we've kind of done the initial triage, then, hey, we're gonna meet with this person, so we really want to learn about you in depth, and what Karel's saying, really know your story, learn about your passions, and so then think about it as like a second reading where someone can dive in further depth. So kind of the first initial pass where you're highlighting key information, and then that deeper second level pass.
So one thing I see often, and it's a little bit less present in these portfolios, although I think it still applies, is people often will articulate sort of the process start to finish or the steps start to finish, and they kind of mix that idea up with critical story junctures. When did you learn something that changed your understanding of the problem or impacted the solution? Because generally, like, everyone's going to follow a pretty similar at this stage of the game, like human-centered process. And so it's less about like, I did research and this was my methodology. Like, that's important, but I'd really like, if you want to make it concise, tell me what you learned through the research and how it drove the story forward, because I know that you did research and I probably know like what type of research you did, give or take.
Yeah, the other one I would add to that is this notion that, you know, it's the line about, you know, sorry, this document's too long. I didn't have time to make it shorter. I think the same thing applies for portfolios. Every single word you use should be intentional. So it's to say, you know, why you did the piece of work you did. Let's say the research that you just talked about, the user research. Well, you know, I decided to do interviews because I wanted to go deeper in terms of understanding, you know, the insights rather than just observing users. Let's say, okay, that just told me something. You know, that you're thoughtful about the way that you use your work. You could state the same length of sentence or two in a more didactic, you know, where I carried this out and got this these kinds of results, or whatever. I'm just think about everything that you've put into the portfolio, and be really economical in your use of words to really address the person that's viewing this. Think about, what do you want them to know? Right? Like, if you were going to say it to them, what would you want them to know about you, rather than just writing some words?
All right. Thank you so much, Karel. To round us out, very quickly in 2 minutes, I'd like to get to Laura, because I know you've been raising your hand for a while. What question do you have? And then after that, I'll close us out.
Hi, I was just curious. A lot of the postgrad opportunities I've seen at design firms and require lots of years of experience, and often the opportunities are for people with a visual or graphic design background. So I'm curious what you have to say about sort of like how to get your foot in the door, how to enter the industry after graduating, maybe with less years of experience. And I'm personally interested more on like the design research strategy side of things. So yeah, if you have any advice about that, that would be great.
I would say one for me is apply anyways. I mean, women are more likely to not apply to positions because I think they aren't qualified versus men generally apply much faster, even if they have less than 50% of the qualifications. So definitely just go ahead and apply, I think is number one. Things that have helped me in the past are also just finding people within the organization on LinkedIn who have a similar background as me and connecting with them and just trying to better understand what the position is looking for. Obviously, I think women in particular are a lot more likely to help women. So I usually try and find other women who have similar backgrounds and are looking for that level of mentorship that you can ask for. So those are just two immediate things. Don't doubt yourself that you don't have enough experience to try.
And for those of you, I think, Laura, this definitely applies to you, but other people in like smaller communities or sort of less metropolitan areas, there's usually a really tight-knit community and a bunch of opportunities to get to know people. And if you go network first or personal relationship first, I think you'll find the best path to success. So for example, in Laura's case, you could reach out to Sam at the Vermont Center for Emerging Technology, which is like in Burlington, it's a really small group. They'll definitely bring you in, show you around. And I think in places like Rhode Island or other sort of slightly less large areas, there's lots of those little groups that are always willing to have people join and sort of give informationals and make a personal connection.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. Let's give another round of applause for our audience, our candidate submissions, as well as our panelists. Lastly, a couple of things. So I know that resumes we didn't really go dig deep into, but if you're looking for more resume and tips, there's a blog that we've shared out in the last month that recaps our previous call that was on resume reviews and portfolio reviews. So I can share that with you all. Tomorrow we have a lovely Spark series with Eric Vredenburg, who's the founder and creative director of Stamen, and he'll be talking about mapping change and designing a visual archive. Topics of street art, graffiti, how communities in urban areas are visually archiving the present and what we might learn from them in the future. So that is happening tomorrow at 1 p.m. as part of the Spark series. To all of our attendees, if you are interested in exploring other design roles that aren't just in the private sector, on Thursday we have a call about the civic industry, so design roles in civic. It would be, very similar skill sets, but just applied in a very different context. Lastly, last but not least, connect with people on LinkedIn. Our lovely panelists, would you be open to chatting with students and young alumni more about your role in design? I see some head nods. So for those people, please just connect and say hello and, ask more questions and dig deeper to figure out what you really want to do with design and how you might make that happen.
Yeah, especially those who we didn't get to today. Like I just got all this feedback, burn a hole in my pocket. Now I got to get it out.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye, everyone.
You too.